On January 7, 2026, the global geopolitical landscape shifted significantly when President Donald Trump announced a monumental proposal for the United States military budget for the 2027 fiscal year. This request, totaling an unprecedented $1.5 trillion, represents a historic leap from the $901 billion allocated for the previous year. Through international news reports and official social media communications, the administration framed this massive financial infusion as the cornerstone of what the president describes as a dream military. The rhetoric surrounding this announcement emphasizes a doctrine of peace through overwhelming strength, suggesting that the current global climate is too dangerous for conventional spending limits. This budgetary pivot is not merely a marginal increase, but a 50% surge designed to modernize every branch of the armed forces simultaneously. International observers note that this proposal aligns with a series of aggressive foreign policy maneuvers that defined the opening weeks of 2026. The timing of the announcement is critical, coming shortly after high-stakes military operations that signaled a new era of American interventionism and territorial interest. By requested $1.5 trillion, the administration is signaling to both allies and adversaries that the United States intends to maintain a level of conventional and technological superiority that is beyond the reach of any rival power. The narrative provided to the public suggests that this expenditure is the only way to ensure the nation remains safe and secure regardless of the foe it may face in the coming decade. From a historical perspective, this budget request eclipses any previous wartime or peacetime military spending in American history, adjusted for inflation or otherwise. It marks a definitive break from the fiscal conservatism that often dictates defense debates, replacing it with a populist-driven expansion of the military-industrial complex. As the world digests the scale of this figure, the focus remains on how such a vast sum will be utilized to reshape global security dynamics. The president has made it clear that this is not just a funding request, but a statement of intent, aimed at solidifying a unipolar global order backed by a level of domestic investment never before seen in the modern era of international relations. A central pillar of the $1.5 trillion military proposal is the controversial and innovative method of financing it through domestic and international trade policy. President Trump has explicitly linked the feasibility of this record-breaking budget to the revenue generated by his administration's aggressive tariff regime. According to international financial reports, the president asserted that without the tremendous income flowing from these trade duties, the defense budget would likely have been capped at a significantly lower $1 trillion. This strategy represents a fundamental shift in how national security is funded, moving away from traditional tax revenue or simple deficit spending toward a model where trade protectionism directly subsidizes military expansion. By utilizing tariff wealth, the administration seeks to present the military buildup as a self-sustaining enterprise that does not place an additional direct tax burden on the average American citizen. However, this economic approach has sparked intense analysis from global financial institutions and nonpartisan organizations. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget has issued warnings that despite the tariff revenue, a budget of this magnitude could contribute to a staggering $5.8 trillion in additional national debt over the next 10 years. Economists from Moody's have also voiced concerns regarding the long-term fiscal stability of this plan, noting that such high levels of debt finance spending could lead to wider fiscal deficits and reduced economic flexibility in the event of a future recession. The international community is watching closely to see if the revenue from tariffs can truly offset the costs, or if the policy will inadvertently trigger inflationary pressures and trade wars that complicate the global economy. This link between trade and defense is a hallmark of the current administration's America First platform, suggesting that economic leverage over foreign nations will be the primary engine for domestic military revitalization. As the debate over the 2027 budget begins, the validity of these revenue projections will be under intense scrutiny. The administration maintains that the tariffs are a win-win scenario, protecting domestic industry while simultaneously building the most powerful military in history. Yet the global financial markets remain cautious about the sustainability of such a massive and rapid increase in government expenditure. The drive for a $1.5 trillion defense budget does not exist in a vacuum. It is the direct result of a series of bold and controversial geopolitical actions taken by the United States in early 2026. International media outlets have highlighted several key events that provided the momentum for this request, most notably the high-profile Special Operations Raid in Venezuela. This operation resulted in the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, an event that shocked the international community and signaled a return to active regime change policies in the Western Hemisphere. Furthermore, the seizure of a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the North Atlantic added to the rising tensions between Washington and Moscow, illustrating a newfound willingness to use naval power to enforce sanctions and maritime dominance. These actions, combined with the president's renewed and public interest in the acquisition of Greenland for national security purposes, have created a narrative of an expanding American footprint that requires a massive increase in logistical and combat capabilities. The administration argues that the acquisition of territory like Greenland is essential for controlling Arctic trade routes and ensuring early warning systems are modernized against emerging threats. Critics and allies alike have noted that these moves represent a significant departure from the international norms of the past few decades, pushing the world into a more transactional and power-based era of diplomacy. The $1.5 trillion is intended to provide the hardware, personnel, and technological edge required to sustain these types of global operations simultaneously. International analysts suggest that the budget is a direct response to the perceived rise of multipolarity, with the United States seeking to reassert its role as the sole global hegemon. By funding a military that can operate with impunity in multiple theaters, the administration aims to deter potential rivals like China and Russia from challenging American interests. The scale of the budget reflects a belief that the current international order is being reshaped and that only the most well-funded military in history can secure American dominance in this new landscape. As these geopolitical tensions simmer, the 2027 budget stands as a fiscal manifestation of a grand strategy that prioritizes preemptive action, territorial expansion, and the total projection of power across the globe. In a surprising turn for a pro-defense administration, the proposal for a $1.5 trillion budget came with a stern and public ultimatum to the nation's largest defense contractors. President Trump directed sharp criticism toward major firms such as Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, now known as RTX, and Northrop Grumman, accusing them of prioritizing corporate profits over national readiness. In statements that reverberated through the global stock markets, the president warned that companies focused on stock buybacks and high executive dividends would be barred from doing business with the newly renamed Department of War. This populist approach to military procurement seeks to force a shift in corporate behavior, demanding that these entities instead invest their record profits into expanding production capacity and accelerating the delivery of critical weapon systems. The administration's frustration stems from long-standing delays in the production of advanced fighter jets, naval vessels, and missile defense systems, which officials argue have left the military vulnerable despite high levels of previous funding. By threatening to cut off the flow of federal contracts, Trump is attempting to reorganize the relationship between the government and the private sector, moving toward a more dirigiste model where the state dictates industrial priorities. This stance caused an immediate reaction in the financial sector, where shares of major defense contractors saw a notable decline following the announcement. Investors are concerned that the administration's focus on production quotas and price controls will erode the profit margins that have made the defense sector a staple of many portfolios. However, the president's supporters argue that this is a necessary step to ensure that the $1.5 trillion is spent efficiently and that the military actually receives the equipment it needs to maintain a competitive edge. The international community sees this as a test of whether a government can effectively discipline the massive corporations that form the backbone of its military power. If successful, this policy could lead to a massive revitalization of the American industrial base, but also risks alienating the very companies required to build the dream military. The conflict between the White House and the boardrooms of the defense giants is set to be a defining feature of the 2027 budget cycle. While the proposal for a $1.5 trillion military budget has been met with fanfare from the administration, the path to its actual implementation remains fraught with legislative and political challenges. As a constitutional requirement, the budget must be authorized and appropriated by Congress, where it is expected to face a gauntlet of debate from both sides of the aisle. Fiscal hawks within the Republican Party have expressed private and public concerns about the long-term impact on the national debt, while Democrats have signaled intense opposition to what they describe as a war budget that neglects domestic social needs and climate initiatives. The international community is watching this domestic struggle closely, as the outcome will determine the United States' ability to follow through on its ambitious global agenda. If Congress scales back the request, it could signal a limit to the president's influence and a more restrained foreign policy. Conversely, if the budget is passed largely intact, it will represent a historic victory for the administration's vision of a reshaped American state. Beyond the immediate legislative battle, the implications of such a budget for global stability are profound. A $1.5 trillion military could trigger a global arms race, as other major powers feel compelled to increase their own defense spending to maintain a balance of power. This cycle of escalation could lead to increased volatility in various flashpoints around the world, from the South China Sea to Eastern Europe. Furthermore, the shift in American priorities toward a massive military buildup may alter the nature of international alliances, with some partners seeking closer ties to a resurgent Washington, while others look for ways to hedge their bets. The 2027 budget proposal is more than just a list of expenditures. It is a blueprint for a future where American power is defined by its willingness to spend and its readiness to act. As the world moves further into 2026, the debate over this $1.5 trillion will serve as a referendum on the role of the United States in the 21st century. Whether this leads to a new era of security or a period of unprecedented global tension remains to be seen, but the scale of the ambition involved is undeniable and historically unique.